The Bitcoin Group, the American original. For over the last 10 seconds, the sharpest Satoshis, the best Bitcoins, the hardest cryptocurrency talk. We'd like to welcome our panelists. Josh Shigala from the Standard.io.
Howdy ho, folks. Howdy ho.
Dan Eve, the Crypto Raptor.
Hola, Bitcoin amigos.
Wasim Al-Sindi from 0x Salon.
Good evening, everybody. It's always a pleasure to be here.
And I'm Thomas Hunt from the World Crypto Network. Moving on to our topics. Issue 1, Bitcoin rallies to touch highest levels since April as traders get bullish on ETF news. Yes, we're finally getting an ETF. BlackRock, the major investment company, is suddenly interested in Bitcoin and backing an ETF, allegedly. They've put in an application for a spot Bitcoin ETF, which we've seen rejected multiple times. I think we've been talking about Bitcoin ETF since the first year of the Bitcoin Group about 9 or 10 years ago. We thought it would be easy to go over the basics again. People can invest their retirement money in the stock market into an ETF. They don't have to hold keys or know anything. Josh Shigala, we've been talking about Bitcoin ETFs for almost 10 years, but judging by the price jump, this must be serious. What's different this time?
Yeah, I think the bankers are rocking into town, and it's not really a good thing. In my mind, I think it's another tether to the old school world that we just don't need. We don't need us to be tethered to these large money suppliers. It's all funny money crap anyway. They printed out of thin air. They've given it to their mates on Wall Street, and they're going to buy Bitcoin with it. It's the ultimate scam. So I don't really care. I mean, yeah, it'll pump the money, but the thing is, if you're pumping a rare asset, something with intrinsic value, with fakeness, it's only going to pump up for a while, and then it's going to dump down because it's been pumped with nonsense. But yeah, I mean, any good price action is good, because what happens is that businesses in this space do well. You know, for those that say price doesn't matter, it's just not true. It does matter. When you have a business in this space, you really see the volume change and the interest change when you start seeing larger price moves on the way up.
Well, and I'll say that it's getting harder and harder to find any stories for this show that aren't about the price. When I Google just Bitcoin on Google News, it is price, 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 price. Everyone's written their own version of the why is the Bitcoin price this today? Now, Dan Eve, I see that last week we predicted Bitcoin would go up, and now it's significantly up. Obviously, we had a triangle chart to prove this.
Indeed, and I have 2 weeks predictions in a row, right? Which is probably like more. That's my record ever. But you know, it's all. I hate to say it, and I hate to be one of those kind of conspiracy theory guys, but it does seem a little coincidental, right? So weeks after Coinbase, Binance getting sued, and all the FUD in the media, and then suddenly BlackRock have got their ETF, and now apparently Wisdom Tree and Valkyrie ETFs as well, and then the news of the Schwab Fidelity Citadel exchange, and it just seems like they may have kind of, I don't know. I'm not saying they would have done anything nefarious and nudged the SEC into kind of trying to create some coordinated FUD, but I mean, it kind of seems that way, right? They've come out pretty well out of it, and I'm sure they bought up during the dip, and have been. And it's one of those things, right? It's like we go, brace yourselves, the institutions are coming. Now they're here, and you're like, they're entering in this way. But maybe that is just a conspiracy. But there's good points and bad points, right? We say all the time that it kind of lends credence to crypto. So whilst you've got the kind of SEC saying it's unregulated and it's bad, and you've got all these governments or random governments around the world, like the UK recently did the report, and they were still saying it's all nefarious in the UK, like this, it's used for drugs and illicit purposes. And then you've got the $11 trillion BlackRock, which is just balling with an ETF. It definitely shows that there's something there. There's something of substance, and the technology is being it's tried, tested. It's 14 years old, is it now? And it's embedded. It's not worldwide yet. It hasn't spread as fast as say ChatGPT that hit 100 million users or whatever it was so quickly. But it's being used, and that's the main thing that Bitcoin needs is a user base, and it needs businesses using it, and it also does need, unfortunately, the kind of seal of approval from the traditional finance systems. Obviously, it could survive without it, but it's kind of a positive thing that they're coming in terms of affirming Bitcoin as a good technology.
It has been quite a dip, Dan, and it was interesting to see how there was foreknowledge on both sides. Some people knew about the SEC issue and they had sold Bitcoin beforehand, whereas other people knew about this ETF filing and were right in position to buy that sell. So it really is interesting to see who has what information. And sometimes you think that you know everything and you're going to corner the market, and then sometimes it completely turns around, even a 20% swing in the price of Bitcoin. Wasim Al-Sindi, what do you think about the BlackRock ETF filing and the subsequent price movement?
Well, I hope you bought the dip. I bought the dip. I'm having my dinner right now, and I certainly bought the dip to go with it. So I'm enjoying this very much. It's very tasty moment of being proven right a lot of the time. So there seems to have been a big market reversal, change in momentum, change in sentiment. We are now double off the lows of the market cycle, right? We hit like a global low of $15,000 roughly. We are now at approximately $30,000. So that is already a 2x. It's usually around the 2x point from the bottom that the kind of let's say the normie finance world kind of wakes up and starts talking about this stuff again. The Bitcoin switch gets flipped in the media and Bitcoin is back and blah, blah, blah. That kind of new cycle of discourse starts. And we all know that the markets are kind of sentiment machines, right? So they are reflecting, the public opinion, which is kind of driving a lot of the buying and selling, whether it's in the real spot Bitcoin on crypto exchanges, or whether it's in this kind of paper hypothecated Bitcoin financial instruments. So so this is the Bitcoin's back moment. And it is now another round of institutional legitimacies from all these big, financial companies like the BlackRocks and the Valkyries and whoever else. And as we've all said, it's been years in the making, all of these spot physical ETFs. But I wanted to just build on a few points that everyone else made so far. So we made the point that price matters, and price matters in many ways with Bitcoin. And one of the most important ways is in terms of the network security. So we must never forget that the price of Bitcoin matters because the reward to the miners is paid in Bitcoins, and they need that money, that reward, to pay their bills, right? So the miners need specialized equipment. They need to use lots of energy to do the mining. And so the higher the price of Bitcoin, the more secure the network is, the harder it is to attack. And that is the core value proposition of Bitcoin, that tomorrow when we wake up, the ledger will be the same as it is today. So the coin balances that you and I have will be the same tomorrow as they are today. Because if they weren't, then this thing doesn't have any value, really. And there were many coins that got attacked because they weren't worth enough, and they got wrecked. People did these 51% attacks. I used to do research projects on the minority coins getting wrecked to try and understand the possible futures of Bitcoin after in a situation where there wasn't enough reward for the miners to keep mining. So the price of Bitcoin really, really matters for network security. I wanted to say something.
And it's fine if a smaller coin loses it and they get 51% attacked and they're embarrassed. But if Bitcoin got 51% attacked, if they lost it at some security point and got embarrassed, it could destroy the entire cryptocurrency market, the entire industry.
Yeah, because Bitcoin is the daddy. It was the first. It's the oldest. It's the most mature. It's the most valuable. And a lot of the architectural economic decisions that have been made by all the other projects in this space are built on top of the knowledge and the considerations that were put into place over these years with Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the most proven project out there by a country mile. I would still say that everything in this space is an experiment, but Bitcoin is by far the most mature experiment.
I would say we've even seen Ethereum switch from a proof of work and from a inflationary model to a deflationary model where they're actually burning the Ethereum, which again, like you're saying, copies what Bitcoin set up, what Satoshi set up originally, which is really amazing.
Yeah. So like scarcity is a hell of a drug. And, Bitcoin is the first and most enduring example of cryptographically instantiated digital scarcity. And so like Bitcoin is the first and the most mature and the oldest. And so as you say, if Bitcoin was to fail because the network security, like we couldn't pay the miners enough to secure the network, that would call into question everything in the crypto space. And so not just proof of work coins, it would call everything into question. And just one last point about the SEC and regulation. There's been a lot of bluster, a lot of noise, and like a few enforcements going on, various token projects being hauled over hot coals, being accused of being securities. Bitcoin is unaffected. And so I noticed in the Web3 space, which is usually what crypto people call everything except Bitcoin. That's basically what Web3 is. They're saying, who orange-pilled Gary Gensler? Who orange-pilled the SEC? That Bitcoin is being treated as different, as sui generis to the other ones. And I will just say that 5-6 years ago, I was working on a regulatory philosophy project, taxonomy project called Token Space. You can look it up, it's online. And in that, I used the lens of epistemology and taxonomy to try and distinguish the similarities and differences of various token projects. And for me, Bitcoin is like the perfect digital commodity. It's not yet a great money, but like it could get there. And it's absolutely not at all a security. Everything else looks way more like a security than Bitcoin does. And the switch we talked about of Ethereum from proof of work to proof of stake makes Ethereum look more like a security than it was before. So there are some like dangers in making those kinds of architectural switches, especially in an uncertain regulatory environment. By the way, I used to work with Gary Gensler at a well-known US university. He read that paper. So some people are accusing me of wrecking Web3. So you're welcome.
That's great. Great anecdote there. It's interesting about the Ethereum switch. I like the way that they did proof of work at first, getting the tokens out to a lot of people, then switch to proof of stake. It seems like that might avoid the centralization that we always see with proof of stake. Of course, given enough time, I don't know, all proof of stake systems seem to centralize in the end. And as Wasim was saying about the price and it not just being about everyone getting rich, that it's about protecting the network. Now I feel kind of noble, just a little bit noble. And I've been to a Web3 conference. It's just like a Bitcoin conference, except with money and women. It's totally different. Josh Segala, you know what time it is. It's the first issue. It's time to predict against the Bitcoin predictor ball, the source of all truth and knowledge in Bitcoin. It predicts the price without the use of triangles. It's entirely circular and spherical.
Unheard of. And last week was absolutely spot on. As usual.
What'll it be, Josh? Higher or lower this time next week?
I'm going to say higher.
Dan, Eve, more optimism. We've got the Bitcoin ETF. As Chris Ellis always used to say, we have to wait for the news to go around the world at least once. Everyone has to hear the news. They have to hear the good news about BlackRock and others trying to make an ETF. What do you think, Dan?
I'm saying that away.
Wasim, is it a sweep? Does everyone agree the price goes higher, which is obviously a terrible sign?
For me, one Bitcoin will always equal one Bitcoin. So the price will remain exactly the same because the only sensible benchmark to measure the value of Bitcoin is against itself. Sorry.
One Bitcoin is one Bitcoin, but we're all securing the network now. We're noble network securers. So will the price of Bitcoin be higher this time next week? It says it's very dark here. Pretty hazy. Reply hazy. Try again. Reply
Oh,
hazy. Try again. The ball doesn't always speak, so it's opting out this week. Moving on to issue 2. EDX crypto exchange goes live, offering Bitcoin and Ether trading backed by Schwab and Fidelity. EDX Markets first announced its launch plans for a non-custodial exchange in September, about 2 months before the collapse of FTX. The announcement comes days after the BlackRock ETF launch, and they've also said they have a second funding round with new investors. Dan, Eve, what do you think about this new exchange launched by Schwab and Fidelity?
Well, they're only focusing on 4, and apart from Ethereum, which, as we said, it's now looking more and more like a security. They've only had the other 3 assets. What are 2 assets? It's obviously Bitcoin, but then Litecoin and Bitcoin Cash. Sadly, not Bitcoin SV. Ooh. Oh, but it did even get, even got a tiny little pump off the back of everything else. That's really cute when that happens. Gives people some hope. But it's also very terrible. Poor people who sold their Bitcoin for SV. But forgetting about that, again, it's another kind of, almost a slap in the face for, not so much a slap in the face for Coinbase, but, because you could say that if you're listing Ethereum, Coinbase listed Ethereum, then, they're the shitcoin casino. But it's interesting they are choosing to have an exchange that's not just Bitcoin, right? They're going down, the multiple assets. Will they expand out eventually? Will they have stuff like Monero or something like that? So other coins that were sort of launched that are may not be considered as much securities as others out there. Will they eventually get tokens and expand out to securities? I don't know. How does that work? Again, it definitely lends credence, right? You've got whilst people are losing faith in Coinbase and Binance, you've got these huge players, Schwab, Fidelity, Citadel, jumping into the market. Don't Fidelity have like 1.3 trillion assets under management or something crazy like that? So again, it's lending credence to the fact that crypto is here to stay. Obviously, Bitcoin's here to stay, but actually that crypto is something that they're also taking a punt on. So it's not just Bitcoin only for these guys. And Bitcoin Cash, that's kind of random actually. That was quite a surprising one, because there's probably other things that I would have thought they'd choose over Bitcoin Cash. They're also starting up a clearinghouse, right? Obviously, they're not going to be settling themselves. They'll be using third parties. So I wonder if they'll end up using Coinbase like BlackRock is for their ETF. Nobody knows. I don't know. But yeah, I think we seem like we've gone from bear season to regulation season, and now we're creeping into institution season again. And maybe, just maybe, because of this is kind of a good timing just before the halvening, maybe we'll see the next slew of countries that are starting to declare Bitcoin as a national currency. It will be national currency season. Just in time for the bull run, so they won't get caught out a bit like, say, El Salvador did buying so high. This is a good opportunity for countries to actually take the deep dive and start using Bitcoin.
Well, it's interesting recently, Dan, I saw a fake economist cover on Twitter, and it had a big picture of Bitcoin, and it said the world reserve currency that we didn't see coming. And it's interesting to think about Brian Armstrong and all the advantages he had. He was in the right accelerator. He had the right backing. He had all this money. They went public on the stock market. Coinbase really had something going. And now we see out of everywhere people attacking them. The SEC attacking them. Now Schwab and Fidelity working together to make their own exchange. The FTX was kind of an attack as well. And of course, Binance with its wild approach to international relations. The pioneers get killed, and then here come the settlers. So it does seem like the big players are here. Wasim, what do you think about their plans to have their own exchange, their own ETF, while all of our existing Bitcoin companies seem to be on fire?
Yeah, there's actually a related saying to what you just mentioned, Thomas, which is pioneers die with arrows in their back. And that implies that it's the settlers that did it, so like maybe that's what's going on now. Maybe like Coinbase was a sacrifice to the gods of the regulation, and they paid the ultimate price for doing a deal with well, maybe we could call them the devil, maybe. But yeah, so I think that it's always interesting to see these regulation first, kind of corporate compliant US centered exchanges appearing. It's very interesting that it's non-custodial. I think that's a massive lesson learned from the last 10 years of crypto exchanges holding your coins and then disappearing, or whatever, or like you're getting hacked, like being massive honeypots and getting hacked. And yeah, I suppose, like as the article says, like FTX, looks almost like a knee-jerk reaction to FTX, the implosion of FTX. So I think it's very interesting. I think the choice of assets is like, for me, it's not surprising. They're just trying to play it as safe as possible, and they've got like regulators have come on record saying basically Bitcoin is cool, Ethereum's kind of cool, and then Bitcoin Cash. Well, I mean, it was a fork, right? It was a network fork. It was, I mean, not quite a copy and paste, let's say, but like if Bitcoin's cool, then it's very likely that Bitcoin Cash is also cool from a regulatory perspective. And like Litecoin really was a copy and paste with a different history, and so it's a very no nonsense coin. Doesn't do much, and like the only thing that I ever had suspicion, like regulatory sense, about Litecoin was there was a guy, like the Litecoin guy, and now there's not really a guy anymore. So that helps a lot when it doesn't look like there's a prominent figure that you rely on the efforts of in order to gain from your investment. And that's one of the kind of stipulations, or one of the elements of the Howey test, which is how the US Securities and Exchange Commission determines whether something like a stock is a security. And they're still using those logics in the crypto space with coins and with tokens. So yeah, I think that's the rationale behind using those projects. They tried to pick less controversial ones. I guess there is a big question of whether they diversify into tokens and whatever. What I would say is I wouldn't be surprised if they go towards things that are obviously like things that call themselves security tokens. Like they're saying, yo, this is security. You're buying securities, regulated security. That's safe for them to do. That's not uncontroversial. But when you get into this middle ground of like all the other Web3 stuff, where we're kind of like, well, it looks like a dog and it barks like a dog and it smells like a dog. Is it a dog? And the regulator is like, you have to find out, and we might sue you in 5 years' time. We're not going to tell you if it's a dog or not. So that's a risk for all these exchanges. And like if you've ever had an account or looked at some of these crypto exchanges that listed quite a lot of tokens, they've been delisting tokens left, right, and center over the years. Like some of these exchanges started with hundreds of tokens. They've ended up with like a handful now because it just got problematic holding, facilitating trading in some of these things. So yeah, I think they're playing it safe. This is kind of like blue chip corporate tactics. Like this is the big boys are actually arriving now. We thought they were arriving in 2017. That was like not the arrival. This is the arrival. That was them kind of like staking the territory, I guess, like staking it out and circling around it. But no, I think they're actually entering now. This is the big boys have arrived.
Well, I guess we're glad to see him. I don't know. The limited offering reminds me of BTC-E. So there's not a good feeling there. They used to have about 5 coins as well. And it's interesting, like you say, Wasim, they seem to prefer copy and paste projects from Bitcoin. So it's too bad. We should have made one of those back in the day, just copied and pasted Bitcoin. And I do love that quote. I was searching for it. And the other one I like that's similar is, come home with your shield or on it, from Sparta, of course. Josh Segala, you know all about exchanges. What do you think about the latest EDX from Schwab and Fidelity? Names you can trust.
Yeah, old money, this is the thing. The old money comes in and steals the thunder, like the other panelists were saying. And it's very, very true. We saw that in the UK with the FCA, which is basically the SEC of the UK, basically making a license, but never granting one and telling people to withdraw their application before they reject them. But then the only people really getting, the only companies really getting the licenses were big players in the market. Because I think the banks have finally gone, there's a bunch of money to be made here, and we'll take them. In terms of security, like it's this weird human made up, this made up language. Oh, it's a security, whatever that means. Well, we don't even know what that means anymore. And then the problem with security tokens is you put in too many barriers of entry, so it's never going to work. So you'd be like, oh, now I'm all above board as a whatever. I'm following all the rules in this one jurisdiction, because if I have to follow all the rules, then I can't, because jurisdictions have different rules that might go against each other. So if I follow this one, it doesn't follow that one anymore, and then it just becomes nonsense. And then let's say you're amazing and you've followed all the jurisdictions, then your project will fail because no one wants to, none of the clients want to jump through so many hoops to get some weird token to be able to use the service that you're trying to build. So it'll fail fundamentally, because the only way you will succeed is have as little friction as possible. You know, this is why Amazon did so well, because it was literally one-click buy. That's how fickle the internet is. They don't want to spend the 5 seconds to put their credit card in to another website. They would just rather one-click buy, and it's done. So to make people that are potential users jump through a million hoops and give KYC and pull down their pants and show their STDs and whatever else they need to do to get the token is ludicrous, and it will never work. So yeah, it is what it is. But yeah, this new exchange, well, old money, welcome on board. I'm sure you'll have a great, fantastic time here in crypto land, and you probably won't scam anybody.
All right, let's move on to the exit question. Who wins, old money or new money? Does Coinbase and other Bitcoin exchanges survive, or will it be these new exchanges like EDX and BlackRock ETF and so forth? Dan, Eve, who wins?
I think Coinbase and Co will survive, but I think they'll just get dwarfed like in numbers by all the the traditional institutions, because what they'll do is they'll bring their existing customer bases. That's just what it's like. It's what's going to happen. I think they'll just they'll like, get on board, everyone. Oh, use ours, don't use Coinbase. It's silly, and then probably pressure the SEC into kind of putting out the fire that is Coinbase. But it will just about survive, I think.
Wasim, will this lead them to victory? Will they have their army of agents suddenly recommend 10% of your portfolio in Bitcoin now that we're selling it? 10%,
Thomas, that sounds like a tithe. It sounds like a church tax or something like that. I've been researching the Crusades recently, by the way, so I've got tithes on my mind. I'm just looking at the stock price of Coinbase at the moment, and boy, that is a painful chart to look at. I'm glad I don't own any of that stock. It is down from a high of $300, and now it's like 300 euros. I'm looking at it and it's somewhere around 55 at the moment. So it's down 80% the last 5 years or so, or 2 years or so. So yeah, I think I largely agree with Dan that Coinbase is going to still be around, but these new players will open up new areas of the market. And I don't know if the old areas of the market really come back to Coinbase in the way that they did in the last bull run. I think every time we see a market cycle turn again, we get echoes of the past, but it doesn't repeat. We always see a different flavor, a different vibe, different set of behaviors, different set of participants and stakeholders, or at least they're kind of proportioned differently. And as a kind of cautionary tale for what might lie ahead for Coinbase, go take a look at the fortunes of some of the earliest cryptocurrency exchanges. We mentioned BTCE. There's an example. Let's go look at Bittrex. Let's go look at Cryptopia. Let's go look at the Krakens of the world. And some of these are going a bit for next. They're still going, but they limp along on almost no volume. Almost nobody. They're ghost towns, these places. And that might be the future that Coinbase has. And I think that Coinbase is sort of setting itself up for a fight now with the regulators in America. That seems to be the way that they're at least signaling in public. I don't know, if if you're a compliant US corporation, I don't know what you think the end game of picking a fight with the regulator is. But I do know that Coinbase also spoke about opening an office in the UK recently. And so that might be there might be an exit strategy or a backup plan there. And in the UK, since Brexit, since the UK left the European Union, there's been a big desire to be more like Singapore, which is kind of like a quasi-independent place that's kind of a tax haven or a place where you can do regulatory arbitrage where rules are much looser. And that might be one of the reasons why Coinbase is interested in the UK, because it can operate in a more permissive environment than the United States is at present. And just to say again about city-states, well, that's a bit like what the Knights Templar set up in the Holy Land in the 12th century, in Outremer, the Principality of Edessa, the Kingdom of Jerusalem, and in Antioch and Tyre, and so on. So there's more than a few similarities between what the Knights Templar were doing and what's happening in the Web3 cryptocurrency space, my opinion. And watch this space for a book that I'm writing about that.
It all comes back again. And it is an interesting choice by Coinbase's lawyers to sue the regulators. Maybe not very often do you get to say to your clients, let's go out in a blaze of glory, right? You built this business. Let's set it on fire and see what happens. And like Wasim was saying, it's interesting to see as we go through kind of these halvening cycles of Bitcoin to see who's still there with us. And to go back to those early names of Bitcoin exchanges, I remember BitInstant. And it was a big deal. People would go to the red phone and they'd get their money out to Charlie Shrem. And Charlie was even cooperating with the FBI, trying to explain to them how, Bitcoin worked, how money laundering worked, and so forth. And as we all know, he got caught up in that with the Silk Road and some of his employees allegedly selling Bitcoin to the Silk Road and so forth. But it's interesting to see in the next halvening cycle, will Binance still be with us? Will Coinbase still be with us? Will there be a different form, a different version? Will Coinbase look more like Binance? Josh Shigala, what do you think? The old money or the new money? Where are we going to be banking our Bitcoin in the future?
Well, in the 80s, or was it the 90s, Zbigniew Brzezinski wanted Russia to have her Vietnam and basically orchestrated or pushed Russia to war with Afghanistan to weaken her. This radicalized the Mujahideen over there and built these radicalized schools, and then they ended up having all the way blowback, if you believe the whole 9/11 stuff, to cause that, and then here we are. But I feel that it's a similar game in business where you get this Randian, this sort of Atlas Shrugged, Ayn Rand style game where you get the old money using the regulators to basically control and destroy competition, ring fence them into a nice protected area, and then make regulation so high that it becomes too much of a burden for startups to compete with. And that's what I see happening in the major markets like the UK and the US. It's fairly obvious now that that's what's happening, and I really hope that Bitcoiners stop attacking Armstrong, because there's this underbelly of hatred towards Coinbase. And while I understand it, because they might have worked with the IRS, or they might have given things across. At the end of the day, they've not had a major hack. They've been good actors in this space in terms of getting Bitcoin in the hands of consumers. They've made it easy. They've allowed for the widespread adoption. Sure, they could have done things better, but right now they are the ones standing up and going to go up against the SEC. And I don't believe this whole divide and conquer thing, where at the end of the day, they're Bitcoiners. They might not be the best Bitcoiners, but they are not the best Bitcoiners. And we should really stand stand with Coinbase and help them get through this. And that's what I think.
It does almost feel like we're saying that Coinbase, the early pioneers, are going to be killed first. And poor Brian Armstrong, a fellow shaved bald head man like myself, is almost like Charlie Brown kicking at that football, and Lucy keeps pulling it away. And like you're saying, Josh, they just use this existing system, the existing regulators. And sure, you thought Bitcoin was good and you were early and you did all these things and tried to do it right. And then at the end of the day, the big exchanges come in and just take the money, take the market.
Take the money and run.
We'll have to see what happens. For now, moving on to the next issue. Had a lot of technical difficulties today, but we're hanging in there. Check out worldcryptonetwork.com. We've got the On This Day feature on the left side. On this day in 2020, we had 2 shows about PayPal accepting Bitcoin, an interview with Dominic Frisby, Peter Todd, Dan Eve, and more. In 2019, we were in Malta for the Understanding Bitcoin conference, talking to Oscar Geiser about his first computer. In 2017, the Bitcoin group number 147, talking about SegWit 2x and the Ethereum flash crash. Also reminding people on Mad Bitcoins that you're still early into Bitcoin, Coinbase versus Cryptsy and Amazon. In 2016, we had Block Talk with a DAO exploit. We also had a Block Talk quickie with a DAO explanation. In 2014, Chris Before Coffee, Day 4, Mini Bits, Let's Talk About Bitcoin. YT Cracker, Bitcoin Baron, live at Bitcoin in the Beltway. Jeffrey Tucker, Bitcoin in the Beltway, and Zhao Tonged playing his song The End of Silk Road live at Bitcoin in the Beltway, all from 2014. You can check out all these videos for free at worldcryptonetwork.com. Moving on to issue 3, the documentary Dirty Coin, a deep dive into Bitcoin's energy dynamics. At first, it sounds very negative, but it might be a good documentary about Bitcoin, addressing the widespread misconceptions associated with Bitcoin and its reputation as a dirty coin. So perhaps it's just a bad title, but it is an interesting new documentary. We also have a new documentary coming out of Canada, addressing the mysterious origins at the center of Finding Satoshi, a new documentary. They say they're going to look for Satoshi forever, and they're probably going to make documentaries about it too. Wasim, Cindy, are you excited for either of these documentaries? Will they ever find Satoshi? And which is more likely, finding Satoshi or convincing people that Bitcoin is environmentally friendly? Go ahead.
Well, so I haven't seen either of these films, so I'm just going on the information we've got here in front of us. This idea of the coin being dirty or not dirty, I think this is a kind of a false binary. Like Bitcoin it just is. It requires a lot of energy to keep going. Like this is the way that proof of work maintains centralized consensus in this network-wide manner. Is it the best possible way of doing it? We don't know. Is it optimally efficient? Well, some people have done studies on this, like Ite al. And colleagues, and they suggested there's a paper called Just Enough Security for Cryptocurrencies from, I think, 2019-20. And they hypothesized that Bitcoin could have an adequate level of security using proof of work with half the energy that is being used now. And that's like a theoretical study. It's not a practical one, per se. We also know that the mining is permissionless. So that means anyone can plug in a machine that does SHA-256 hashing and do the mining. So we can't know where it's being done, but to an extent, we can know some things about the distribution and the location and the energy sources of the machines doing the mining, but we can't really know all the details. So we can't know what the energy sources are. We can't know what the externalities to the environment are of all of that. I would say that I'm kind of writing a book about proof of work at the moment as well. So my take on it is a little bit more finer grained than is it dirty, is it clean, is it good, is it bad? I don't think moral arguments are that useful because, they just set up polarities and then you can't really have a conversation if there's people on either side of that debate. So instead try to think about costs and benefits. So think about the benefits of Bitcoin and think about the costs and then think about how they relatively balance and accrue, and then make your own mind up about that. But what I would say is, like, and I've also written about Bitcoin being a time machine or a decentralized clock. So if you think about what happens every 2 weeks in the difficulty adjustment algorithm, there is a rebalancing of the probability of one individual proof of work, one individual cycle of SHA-256 computation, which you can think of like a lottery ticket, the probability of that lottery ticket winning the lottery of finding a block and you getting the reward. And that is done to keep the target inter-block time, the amount of time between blocks, relatively constant. So the small hand of the Bitcoin clock ticks relatively constantly. But then the implication of that is that there isn't actually a satiety to Bitcoin in terms of energy. Bitcoin doesn't know. There is no enough to the amount of energy that Bitcoin can take. And so you can make an argument, like, we exist on Earth in 2023 in a paradigm of energy scarcity. Like, there is a finite amount of energy we're capturing, mostly from the sun, directly or indirectly. Whether you like it or not, them's the breaks. That's where we are now. And if Bitcoin has no upper limit to the amount of energy it can desire and it needs to secure it, and we as humans and other things that are living on the earth also need some energy to exist, then you can see that there might be some kind of potential issue with that further down the line. And so, like, I would prefer to think more in terms of the kind of the end game of all of these things. Now, of course, the counter argument is always, and I've made these arguments myself in the past, green energy. Will Bitcoin incentivizes the deployment of renewable energy? That is the cheapest marginal source of energy, blah, 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 blah. And that's all well and good, but we do seem to be in a planetary moment where shit is hitting the fan in quite a lot of different ways. And so I see arguments that are valid on both sides here. I don't think it's as clear cut as one or the other, but I'm really interested to hear what you guys think.
Well, I think one of the main keys that Wasim said there was about costs and benefits. When the media talks about this, they talk all about the environmental costs of Bitcoin, and they never talk about any of the benefits. So if we can at least regulate that argument to have a little bit more on the benefit side, I think that would help out a lot. Josh Shigala, what do you think about this new documentary, Dirty Coin, and the other documentary, Finding Satoshi?
Satoshi, the elusive one who shall, I don't know why people are so obsessed with finding him. It's just like, who cares? Look at the code. Let's go. It's awesome. What he, she, they did, I don't really care. Honestly, that's so amazing that it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. Anyway, I haven't seen him. I think it's one of those clickbait titles, like, you know, someone that's right into some sort of diet might say, this ruined my life. If I knew this about this diet, I wouldn't. And then you'd watch the video and they're right into it. And it's just sort of a trick title. So I'm hoping that's the case with this. But yeah, I don't know. It's such, we've gone over it so many times that we as a society need to use more energy, not less. The more we use, the better. We just need to find better ways of energy, and there are better ways of making energy. I mean, and I've said it on this show over and over, there's infinite amount of energy underneath our feet. There's literally sitting on massive ball of lava. And there's just so much heat. The Tesla was going on about the ionosphere. There's also, I mean, it's just ridiculous. There's 0 point energy. I don't know. There's just all sorts of stuff we can go towards. The ridiculousness of the energy. And if you look at the miners, they're actually putting in a lot of effort researching renewable and cheap energy. So actually, the Greens should be thanking Bitcoin for all the money that's flowing into R&D into finding cheap renewables, because actually the only way you can get dirty energy for Bitcoin at a cheap price is if the government's subsidizing it. And if the government's subsidizing it, it's usually in a socialist country or something that and then when it's subsidized, the government gets really angry when you're using
a
it.
socialist country or Texas.
Or Texas. and then they come and arrest you for using their energy for free, and so they don't like it. So it doesn't last long if you're a miner using subsidized coal energy or oil. It just doesn't work. So what works? Well, putting your miners next to a power station, next to a dam, next to a hydroelectric power plant, and there's even power plants using it to just grab energy at night when stuff's going down and they don't want to throttle because it takes a lot of power to throttle, so they just store the energy in Bitcoin. This whole talk is just so boring, and I'm sick of people bringing it up over and over again. And it's like, it just makes zero sense to think that it's dirty. It's just, there's so many things in our house that are constantly on, shops that constantly have lights on. Well, they have lights on for security. There's street lights. We have street lights when there's no one in the street. Why? Because you should have them, because there might be one person walking in there that could be killed if we don't have them. Is that a waste of energy now? Should we turn off all street lights in the world because maybe, a few people get killed? Of course we should. It's ridiculous to say we shouldn't. Anyway.
It is interesting, Josh. It only took one cycle of the Texas paying people to not mine Bitcoin, essentially paying people not to work, before they started to get upset about it and realize they're like, hey, we have to pay a large subsidy to have these Bitcoin miners balance out our energy grid, because they have to pay them when they're not mining. And it just drives people crazy, like paying farmers not to farm. In the same way, I think the media can't stand it that we don't know who Satoshi is. They say, okay, you got this great new invention, Bitcoin. Okay, well, who's Thomas Edison? Who's Tesla? Who's Elon Musk or Zuckerberg, right? We need to get them up here, get them on the interview, explain why you created Bitcoin, explain your background, your history. We need to understand you. And Satoshi has denied us of that. We can only grasp at the background of who or what Satoshi was. People say it's a woman. They say it's a team of people. They say it's a lone genius or a space alien. All of those are equally valid. We have no evidence beyond, really. I mean, a little bit here and there, Josh, but we don't know like who made this thing, and that drives the media nuts. And especially when BlackRock and these other people are like, we're going to put our money in and we're going to build all these services for Bitcoin. I'm like, what? That thing invented by nobody?
Well, I think the biggest thing that they're looking for is to be able to attack that person, because when that person comes out, they're obviously going to be a fallible and imperfect human. But as an enigma, they can be perfect, because we don't know all the dodgy shit that human thought. We don't know what they wanted. All we know is the postings on Bitcoin Talk Forum. But apart from that, there's nothing to pick on.
Well, and we don't get to play our favorite game in the media, where we build someone up and then we tear them down. You're a great artist, you're amazing, and then boop, you're Michael Jackson, you're abusing children. Like we go right up the thing and right down the thing. And with Satoshi, we don't seem to be able to grasp onto him, her, they, them, it, whatever it may be. So I think it's going to keep driving the media crazy. And I think we're going to see a lot more documentaries about this. Exit question. Which one do you prefer? If you had to see a documentary, say in the theater or in the comfort of your home, Wasim, which one would you go see? Would you see Dirty Coin, or would you see Finding Satoshi?
I would go see the Dirty Coin one. I think that the Finding Satoshi, honestly, the best thing that ever happened to Bitcoin was Satoshi disappearing 12 years ago. That was the best thing that ever happened to Bitcoin. As Josh said, if Satoshi was still around, then it would just be bad news for whoever whatever person, group of people, machine intelligence is, hyperdimensional aliens from the future. It doesn't matter who or what they are, they would be having a bad time. So it's great that they disappeared or died or whatever, stopped caring, just went away. So I would watch the Dirty Coin one, because there might actually be some kind of nuance there. Whereas this kind of by now, the identity of Satoshi is probably the biggest mystery on the internet. And so this is why we see all this kind of like clickbait, rumor mill junk all the time. And you're not going to learn anything from that. If you want to know who the candidates for Satoshi are, that information is already out in the open. We know some of these people. And so you can find that out without watching this stupid film.
Oh, I don't know. You're putting right into my point there. I know some of these people. That's why I'd watch the Finding Satoshi movie. I want to be like, oh, they interviewed Tone or Jameson, or, oh, they're featuring Adam Back. We had dinner with him once. So that's the one I would watch. But just based on that, Josh Shigala, what would you watch? Dirty Coin or Finding Satoshi?
Dirty Coin, I guess. Yeah.
Josh has chosen very serious Netflix selection there. Dan, Eve, Dirty Coin or Finding Satoshi? It's pretty much going all towards Dirty Coin right now.
Well, I skipped the main question. I'm just on the exit question, but I just want to say on the energy thing, right? Like how they I remember one of the articles said that I think it was about the mining they wanted to put in Texas, and they're taking advantage of the energy system, and the real good comment was, no, they're using the energy system just like any other business pays for access to that energy system. Like that's literally how the whole business goes. So what do you go? You start campaigning and say businesses should be shut. They're not allowed electricity. This business is allowed electricity, but this isn't. It's just kind of crazy. And the fact is that wasted energy really is energy that's from renewables that's literally going to nothing, because it's not being used in some way. So why not ship Bitcoin miners out there to actually take advantage of the wasted excess energy, let alone the methane flaming they're doing. What's the word? What's the flaring? That's it. Flaming.
Natural gas from fracking wells.
Yeah. So why not make use of that, and then just instead of letting methane out into the atmosphere, actually use it to for something good, for financial gain, which then can be used to put more R&D, as Josh said, into finding better renewable sources of energy and other energy. Like nuclear fusion, which seems like every 5 minutes there's an article about how it's just around the corner. But yeah, it's we're gonna have Dyson spheres and all that crap soon, so nobody's really gonna care about that giant space sails with all of that fiddly stuff. But
I've got an interesting point for us to think about. Here's one for you, Dan, maybe the others. Okay, which is when we get nuclear fusion, when we get Dyson spheres or space sails, they're not going to be equally distributed around the world, are they? We know that technology is going to be in the hands of a small group of people or a country or something like that, and they will be able to extract an asymmetric advantage in all kinds of places, but including Bitcoin. So what does that mean for the security of the network if one group of people have way more energy than others? Because I have a theory that Bitcoin is vulnerable in terms of security as the paradigms change, the energy generation paradigms change.
Well, I mean, you'd have both the chips and the energy, right? Because if you just have energy, you don't have necessarily Bitcoin miners, but you need the China system, the foundry. You would need ever increasing chips to take over Bitcoin as well. So it would be a combination of the two.
Now, when you've got your nanobots building the Dyson sphere around the sun, you'll have them also working on building a fabrication, in space, a fabrication plant in space. So one person who holds the energy will hold everything, but there'll be a bit of a space race, right, to it. There may even be, by that time, there'll be cooperation. There'll be actually countries going, hey, we're building a Dyson sphere or whatever, let's all just cooperate and share it, rather than my Dyson sphere, that sort of thing. So hopefully everyone will be all love and fairies and stuff
it would be a big disaster if, say, the aliens crash landed or perhaps worked with one government, if they chose a winner, say at Roswell or somewhere else, and started giving them technology from the future to be slowly released over time, making that country the economic leader of the world. That would be a very big surprise. Josh Shigala, what do you think about this topic?
Oh, well, not much. Dyson for you. I think at the end of the day, we need more energy. We should be using more energy. None of this Earth Day nonsense. because what a true Earth Day is using more energy. Honestly, we just, this whole ridiculous farce that we're using too much energy is crazy. It's crazy. When people used to die of toxic shock by having smoke from fires in their houses and instead of a nice clean lamp, ridiculous.
Well, and we're certainly not going to get to space conserving energy. It takes so much energy to break through the atmosphere to get to space and all of that. And as well as Josh is saying, now if we've got enough energy and we've got Dyson spheres and all this stuff, I can take a shower as long as I want. There we go. True victory. And
Wait, we said energy, not water, Thomas, not water.
They'll figure out a recycling system. It just
But
matters.
if you have enough energy, you have enough water too, because there's plenty of water that you just need to desalinate.
And ice, the true sign of all civilization, ice. Well, let's move on to issue 4. Honk if you love Bitcoin. Bitcoin Lightning takes the wheel of a European rally car adventure with a comically loud horn, a candy machine, and a jukebox filled with Mozart, metal, and more. It's the Bitcoin Ambassadors Rally Car Adventure. And you got to see the car here. Oh, what a story. It sounds like they're going across Germany, competing in these rally races, convincing their campground owners to take Bitcoin. And a lot of it reminds me of this show. They have a candy machine that accepts Bitcoin, just like Ben built. They have an interactive jukebox that you can pay to play songs remotely. They've got a horn that you can turn off and on. It's a mobile Bitcoin Lightning rally adventure. Dan, Eve, what do you think about the incredible Bitcoin Ambassadors rally car? Pretty fun.
It's pretty cool, right? They're doing what, 8,000 miles. I'm surprised that they don't have some sort of we could have a Bitcoin miner like somehow in the car, right, mining as they're doing it, and I don't know, running off of maybe some solar panel or something like that. I don't know, but it's pretty cool. I like the idea of the lightning powered what was it, the jukebox, and the first thing I thought was, I wonder if they've got Rick Astley, because I'm gonna just rickroll them the entire time. But yeah, they have been rickrolled many times already. And what else? It was the lightning switch to the horn's pretty cool. So that's kind of nice, a nice little kind of quaint way of going and talking to people about Bitcoin, meeting people on the road and all these different places, doing this huge tour, and just I kind of like the Mormons, right, doing the door to door. They're going from pit stop to pit stop, preaching the word of Satoshi. So I like it.
And I wanted to do much the same thing back in the day. So once again, the great thing about the internet is any idea that you have, someone else has it too. And now someone else is acting on it, so I don't have to do anything. It's great for me. Wasim, what do you think about this? They've got lightning. You can pay them. You can honk the horn. Everything.
I mean, it's a cute project. As to like the difference it's going to make, like to 8 billion people that live on this planet and what they need, I don't know. It seems like they're driving, most of the route is through the Nordic countries, which are already like a little bit leaning towards the sorts of ideological positions that would be well suited to Bitcoin. We know there's lots of Bitcoin miners, Bitcoin users, supporters in those Nordic countries. So I do wonder if they're a little bit preaching to the choir here. Like, I don't know if they're really changing that many people's minds, but it sounds cool. Like, who wouldn't want to go on a road trip in the summer through Northern Europe? Like, it's quite nice. See these pictures, looks pretty cool. Like, yeah, I think it's fun. Nice for them. Cool story, bro, etc. But as to the real change it's going to make, I don't know.
It's an Andreas Antonopoulos level of bringing us down there. Oh, but it's still fun and pretty. Those are two good things. Josh Agala, what do you think about the rally racer for Bitcoin Lightning?
Man, it reminds me of the old days where we used to celebrate lots of people. Like it reminds me of, who are they? Austin and Becky from Life on Bitcoin. I don't know if you remember those guys. And they traveled around the world spending all their precious Bitcoin to spread the word. And I think they must have blown past 1,000 Bitcoin over the days, and you just think, oh, poor Austin and Becky. But yeah, it's that sort of flavor of the old days, you know, and I kind of miss those days where we all, as a group, celebrated every new shop that accepted Bitcoin. And it'd be cool with Lightning if the Bitcoin you know, community was a little bit more sort of celebratory of new things that people invent on Lightning. Instead, they just sort of assume, and the only thing that gets celebrated is like BlackRock doing something with Bitcoin or something like that, where it's like, no, like, you know, someone just made an ATM and you can, you know, move the claw and pick out some candy through Lightning. Like that's the fun stuff. That's the cool stuff. And we should be celebrating that a little bit more than these behemoth old money nonsense coming into this space.
I agree, Josh. It is like the old days. It's nice to have a nice, fun story every once in a while. And we have a bonus story today. Moving on to issue 5, the IMF capitulates on Bitcoin bans, says they're not effective, which is what we've been saying on this show for years. The IMF suggests that countries consider not banning crypto, as previously they were recommending it. However, this news has not spread to Argentina, where they're attempting to ban crypto. Wasim, what do you think of this major change in the same time that we've seen the investment community, BlackRock, Fidelity, Citadel, all these other companies coming into Bitcoin? We now see the IMF and the international community, with the exception of Argentina, perhaps accepting Bitcoin as well. Are we just winning on all fronts now?
Well, I mean, we've been saying, like, people in the Bitcoin community have been calling Bitcoin things like free speech money as long as this network has been around. So you can't stop it, can't regulate it, the network into submission. You can regulate the entry points and the companies and the legal entities that deal with these things, but you can't stop the thing. It's an unstoppable force. And so, like, it's interesting to see the IMF, like, you know, the International Monetary Fund, the kind of whatever final boss of final bosses of regulated global financial capitalism, realizing this. It's taken a minute. We've been saying it for a very long time. And I would just make a point about Argentina, which is that Argentina is a basket case economy with rapidly devaluing currency and very, very high inflation. And so the reason, you know, if you think about that, hold that in your mind, then think about why they might be really against Bitcoin. Well, this is like a possible candidate for hyper-Bitcoinization, or at least for Bitcoin to be more attractive in the minds of the citizens of that country than the currency they have now. And just a little note on Argentina, I went there 2015-ish, I think, and I was in Buenos Aires, and I brought dollars from Uruguay. And there was this situation where the government had set an exchange rate between dollars and the Argentinian pesos, but the black market was offering double the exchange rate, twice as many pesos for your dollar. So you would walk down Calle Florida, one of the main streets in Buenos Aires, people would just be shouting out cambio, cambio, which means change in Spanish. And you would go and do black market transactions, not me, of course, but like I saw other people doing this, do black market transactions to get Argentinian pesos at this 50% discount compared to the central bank rate. And indeed, you would see there were boats between Uruguay and Argentina, from Colonia, Uruguay to Buenos Aires. You would see Argentinians go over to Uruguay to use the ATMs to get dollars out, which you couldn't do at the ATM in Argentina, to go back to where they live to take advantage of this black market rate. And the way you could tell the Uruguayans from the Argentinians is the Uruguayans as a nation are addicted to yerba mate tea. So they would carry a thermos under their shoulders, whereas the Argentinians didn't. So you could, I mean, like, generally speaking, you could tell almost to a man or a woman if they were Uruguayan or Argentinian. And it was very much like a little run that they were doing to do this regulatory arbitrage because of the basket case economy and the high inflation in Argentina. And Argentina is a country that elected a right-wing market reformist government, and they, you know, drank the IMF Kool-Aid, drank the World Bank Kool-Aid, took, you know, restructuring of debt and loans and you know, all of that, like market liberalization, all that stuff that neoliberal you know, world order governments want you to do, and their economy is absolutely screwed as a result of it. So that's why Argentina doesn't want to play nice, because I think Bitcoin's a valid competitor to their, failing traditional financial ecosystem.
And it's been working out so well so far as well. It's interesting, both Brian Armstrong and Argentina both trying to do what you think would be the right thing, following the regulators, following the large groups, and it ends out not working for them. Josh Agala, what do you think? The IMF is suddenly on our side. You can't ban crypto.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. It's an interesting take, because if I remember correctly, they were also warning El Salvador against what they did, but maybe they're not going all out and like recommending that countries switch to Bitcoin. But maybe, look, the thing is,
not yet.
You have to remember with El Salvador that their currency failed a long time ago as well. Like that, so it's a different situation. Yeah. But we have this thing called the Streisand effect. And really, if you ban something, then people get all, especially if it's a ridiculous ban. So then people start talking about it. The other thing that I think that the IMF might see, and I'm not sure if you didn't share the article up front, but banning cryptos is starting to become so, it's like banning AI, right? It's something that's just impossible to do. You can't do it because it's so broad. What is crypto? Well, it's a thing that can be held on a ledger. Like, what defines decentralization? Even the Bitcoiners can't say what that means. It's a scale. Does it mean now that games aren't allowed to sell in-game items? They are because it's a centralized server. Oh no, they're not, because there's 3 servers hashing a string of blocks together. Is that now illegal? Like, it just becomes a headache for any regulator for anything, really, and it just becomes a game of whack-a-mole. So embrace it, and on top of that, you get the problem that the Red Flag Act had in the UK with the regulators banning, well, basically not banning cars, but making it so ridiculously hard to own a car that the UK fell so far behind the car industry of the world that finally, when they were reversed these ridiculous regulations, they came up, and they took years to catch up to the Ford Motor Company and the Germans that were making motor cars, and just feared ahead. So I think the IMF might be a little bit frightened to say, in years to come, when the countries that ignored their advice are booming because they actually accepted Bitcoin, and the countries that followed the IMF's advice might be totally wrecked because they weren't allowing their citizenry to actually hold some of these rare digital assets. And so maybe they're future thinking and not wanting to look ridiculous like Peter Schiff does.
As Nicholas Klein said at a convention of the Amalgamated Clothing Workers of America in 1918, first they ignore you, then they ridicule you, and then they attack you and want to burn you, and then they build monuments to you. Dan, although this quote's often spoken by Gandhi, who didn't say it, are we at one of those later points? Are they going to build monuments to us soon?
Well, I wonder, a certain part of me does wonder whether the capitulation was sponsored by BlackRock and some arm twisting, because BlackRock's not going to go into something that the IMF's like heavily against, or shall I say the IMF isn't going to go into something that's that the biggest asset manager on earth is in for. So that probably had a bit to do with it. I'm in agreement with Josh though. Like you can't ban it, and therefore you're just going to end up like, if someone puts a rule down that they're unable to enforce, then they just look silly. And no one wants to look like an idiot who can't enforce rules properly, right? You know, it's again, it's just the whack-a-mole thing. It's, you know, it's the multi-headed ninja snake. You could chop a bit off, but then, you know, it'll start growing again, and you know, you just can't stop Bitcoin, and the decentralization is the reason for that. The miners get banned somewhere, they move somewhere else. It's just this cycle where it just gets knocked down slightly and then rebuilt stronger elsewhere, where the laws are more acceptant. So I do like the way they did kind of say in the report that crypto offered protection against macroeconomic uncertainty. So they're kind of saying that actually that kind of alludes to the fact that it's a hedge against inflation without actually saying that, right? Also that the buzzword, it said promoted financial inclusion, which is something that we have always talked about, right? That Bitcoin opens up, it's free and open access, and it means that anyone can use it. You don't need a bank account that someone's going to shut you down because they don't agree with your identification, anything crazy like that. And it also acknowledging it's saying faster payments among other benefits. So, you know, Lightning it just completely poops on Visa and MasterCard. So, you know, here we are. We've got these ancient systems that are ubiquitous around the world, and they just can't compete with the new technology. So that's something that's really, really reassuring. But one thing that was crazy from that report or the article, as I said, what they also saw in CBDCs was a way to promote resilience in communities vulnerable to natural disasters. What does that even mean? So, like, how can crypto help them against like a volcano? Obviously, they could use the power of the volcano, or like a tsunami. Like, oh no, like the tsunami's come. Maybe they're referring to this. Obviously, there's the old adage that that you lose your keys or your private keys on a yacht, right? I dropped my ledger off the side of the boat. So a tsunami would help, you know, give you the excuse that you lost your ledger. So maybe that's the way that it helps communities vulnerable to natural disasters.
If you look at the picture behind me, it's actually a reenactment of people losing their private keys. right behind me.
The great tax exodus.
Well, and as they said on South Park, money cures AIDS. So maybe you can fight tsunamis with cash. It just hasn't been tried yet. You could also nuke tsunamis, tornadoes, other kinds of activities can be stopped with nuclear weapons. We have one more bonus issue breaking at the time of the show. Really quick, guys. Belgium has ordered Binance to cease crypto services in the country. Is this beginning of a new wave where they start to ban Binance? Josh Shigala.
Yeah, again, this is regulators basically kicking out the startups, kicking out the trailblazers, and I bet you anything that some bank in Belgium will start allowing people to buy crypto on their service. So this is how it goes. Yeah. We mentioned it early in the show, and I bet you bottom dollar that that's what it is.
First they ban you, then they copy your services. It sounds like Apple. Dan, Eve, what do you think? Is everybody going to ban Binance now?
Well, it definitely seems like it's open season for Binance. Didn't they recently also withdraw out of the Netherlands and France? Maybe that's a sign that that there have been some goings on inside the company, that they're trying to really scale back very, very rapidly because they know that they might get caught out. Maybe some other crazy leaks like that, like, yo, bro, we were an unlicensed security exchange or whatever it was. Bro. So, or maybe they're just battening down the hatches and trying to weather the storm, right? And say pull out until they can get the licenses that they need. But yeah, I have faith. I don't think they're completely bad. I think they've tried to be good. Obviously, they've tried to evade regulation, but isn't that what Bitcoin has liked all along? Like, yeah, let's evade regulation, blah blah blah. And then Binance does it, and they're like, oh, yeah, Binance.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I kind of think, I hope that they're not bad actors and that they do actually survive. Because again, another I just don't want to see the whole industry get completely, washed out by all the traditional players. Coinbase goes, Binance goes, and then you just have the old boring BlackRock and Fidelity and all the other old school companies that just basically wipe the floor using the regulators.
It still feels strange this whole time with Binance. It's like, aren't you the pirate king? No, I'm not the pirate king, but you've got a pirate hat and you got a peg leg and you're missing an arm and you got a hook for an arm. I'm not the pirate king. And we just keep passing this around and more. It's like Belgium bans them, Netherlands bans them. They have no physical location. They might be sued or are criminally sued by the SEC in the future, allegedly. Wasim, what do you think? This pirate play keeps going on. We keep chasing Binance around and until they become BTC-E.
Well, I read an interesting book recently, posthumously released book by the social anthropologist David Graeber, who wrote an excellent book about debt, and he wrote a book about the pirate enlightenment, where he was talking about would-be pirate utopias, like lawless kind of libertarian paradises that were set up in various different parts of the world. And I do wonder if something like that would probably be quite handy for Binance right now, a place where they could actually set up home and apply their trade.
It's interesting in the William Gibson books, he often talks of Brazil as a data haven and a place where you can do anything you want on the internet. And maybe it's not Brazil, but another country like that would be really convenient for Binance or a similar company to have right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'll just say one note about Belgium. Belgium, the capital of Belgium is Brussels, and Brussels is where most of the bureaucracy of the European Union is located. And so this is kind of it's very much a country that is run by bureaucracy and bureaucrats. And so it doesn't surprise me in the slightest that there is a heavy regulatory hand in Belgium. But I mean, as we've said, that they're also following the lead of other European countries. So it seems to me like it's a coordinated action to squeeze Binance out of the European Union. And, like the game of whack-a-mole that Dan was talking about earlier, Binance will live to fight another day, might get a bit battered and bruised, but they'll sail their pirate ship somewhere. Corsairs. They're not pirates, they're corsairs. Barbary corsairs, not pirates, corsairs, which I'm also researching for my book, by the way. So I think that they'll pop up somewhere else. In a different location, different jurisdiction. I do wonder, because we've got nation states now that seem to be very pro Bitcoin. I do wonder if those will be the logical safe havens for these companies in the future. And the names of some of those, like the Paraguays, the El Salvadors, and some of these tropical islands, the St. Kittses, the Nevises, the Solomon Islands, and so on. So I do wonder if these will be the safe havens, the decentralized safe havens for the new wave of regulatory, or the avoidance of or the exit from the game, playing the game of regulatory whack-a-mole.
Yeah, I mean, it's always, as a Bitcoin business owner, it's one of these things that you've always got to have plan B or plan C or plan D on the table, that you cannot just settle down. You have to, so even if you go to one of these places, you have to be prepared to move the operation if it becomes hostile. And because for anyone to be a politician, you actually have to be a bully. That's what you are. You're a bully. And yeah, you might be a bully that resonates with you right now, but you're telling that bully to act in a certain way and force them to act in a certain way. And so you've always got to stay on the ball, and that's just how it's worked up till now. And I don't see any change. I mean, we see that with Brian Armstrong having to deal with the SEC. You see that with a lot of crypto projects. You see that with XRP, who tried to play ball, also get hammered and slammed. So yeah, I'm actually in absolute wonder how CZ has managed to stay so large for so long. I don't understand how it works. I don't get it. It confuses the hell out of me. But he's still there. Things are apparently seifu.
It has been interesting, Josh, to see it all happen and in slow motion. And as Wasim was saying, all you have to do to stop being a pirate is change the name. They call him Sir Walter Raleigh. Now he's a captain, not a pirate. And I thought for sure Wasim was going to say, he was going to be, in Belgium, they have very fine chocolates. All right. I think we're running out of time. Let's move on to predictions or story of the week. Josh Shigala, are you ready with a prediction or a story of the week? Go ahead.
Yeah, my prediction is that we are going to see some sort of regulatory sort of guidance, maybe, because they can't just keep smashing Coinbase and all that. So I think now with BlackRock coming in, we might see some clarity in the space, and the clarity will say, quite frankly, well, it's almost impossible to operate here unless you've got $1 bajillion to buy the license, and we're only giving away 3 of them. So and that will then lock in the old money, and ta-da, the old trick has happened.
Dan, Eve, prediction or story of the week. Go ahead.
I predicted that the IMF, but they've been breached now, and they will eventually become Bitcoin shills. The tides will turn, and they'll be like going, "Say, Panama, have you thought about adopting Bitcoin as your national currency?" One day.
Oh, by the way, where next week on Monday you can start testing the standard.io interface. So it'll be really interesting to get your feedback, lock up some assets, borrow some S-Euro, pay it back. It's all test net coins, but it's just fun. And give us some feedback. It'd be really cool.
Very cool. And check it out at thestandard.io. Wasim Al-Sindi, do you have a prediction or a story of the week? Go ahead.
It's a bit of both, actually. I think that all of this kind of regulatory wave that's going on, all these institutions coming in, this is all going to be very good for Bitcoin. So as distinct from other coins, tokens, cryptocurrencies, I think, so the way that Bitcoin functions, the way that it was designed, the way it was architected, and the way it behaves will give it a massive advantage in this new, more regulated environment that we seem to be existing in and going into. And so these are all very good things for Bitcoin. So Bitcoin was always the move slow, don't break things philosophy. And like when it seemed like we were in the Wild West, that wasn't the optimal strategy. We saw all these other coins come and take or other networks come and take the limelight with their flashy claims and their snappy designs. But now I think this is now the Bitcoin's time to shine. It's coming back.
All right. Positive news for exchange. My story of the week is don't let children touch your electronics. I have these buttons that let me play sound on my board. And recently a friend of mine's kid came over and pushed all the buttons on the board. And can you break it? Yes, you can break it. It seems like my board is dying on average every 10 to 15 minutes. It completely breaks and I reset it. And I'm afraid to touch it in general. So don't let children touch your electronic devices. That's my story of the week. If I get a new board, I'm going to get like a cover for it. I'm going to put like a sheet on top of it so people don't think, oh, that's a fun button pushing game. And it's really like a board that I use to make the show. So that's my, technical advice for the week. There you go. So thanks again to everybody for joining us. Be sure to give us a thumbs up down below. Leave us a comment. Hello to the chat. Sorry, we changed YouTube's. It must be one of those Mercury rising weeks or whatever it is. Everything's going wrong. So
it's the summer solstice, isn't it?
It's a summer solstice. It's always, stars are affecting us, as Shakespeare said. But we're running out of time. Until next time, bye.
Bye.